Most obviously, Emerson's famous lecture of 1837, American Scholar, is a call for Americans to forge their own independent literary visions. We have paid homage too long, Emerson says, to the muses of Europe. We have imitated too long Milton, Wordsworth, Coleridge, for instance, and now it is time for us to forge a uniquely American literature. Emerson articulates this idea in Self-Reliance as well. When Emerson was giving this lecture in 1837, and when he was writing Self-Reliance in the years leading up to 1841, this idea that America needed to forge a literature that corresponded in genius to what the country saw as its political brilliance was a cliche. Emerson was saying nothing new when he said to the graduating class, 1837 class of Harvard, don't imitate European models anymore. Try to forge your own unique vision. The power of American Scholar does not come from that idea, which was pretty stale in Emerson's time, and it feels almost like a cliche. Nor does the power, in my opinion, come from another reigning idea in American Scholar, and that is the distinction between the mere thinker, who is overly specialized, and man thinking, who is what we would call, to use the cliche, well-rounded. Emerson says that most men identify so closely with their interests, with their jobs, with their scholarly fields, say, that they're only half men, quarter men, eighth men, not a man but a finger, say. And that a true American scholar will combine the work of the hand and the work of the head, will combine theory and practice, will learn as many subjects as possible, will cultivate as many interests as possible. Another really powerful idea, obviously, but the idea that organicity, all parts working together to form a powerful whole, not a new idea. Coleridge was developing such an idea page after page of his philosophical prose, primarily in his Biographia Literaria. For me, perhaps the most interesting idea in American Scholar is Emerson's theory of reading. So Emerson says that there are three primary influences on the American Scholar. One is nature, two, action, and three, the past, or reading, or books. Now, Emerson himself was a voracious reader. It's stunning to see the number of books he read or at least consulted. You can go into his journals, and it's mind-boggling. As one of his biographers, Robert E. Richardson, said, it appears that Emerson read almost every book published from 1820 until the time he passed on in the 1880s. But Emerson was selective in his reading. He generally did not read fiction. He almost never read books about books, meaning criticism. He almost never read scholarly accounts of the past, works of history, by an intellectual scholar. And he rarely read biography even, which is odd given how much he valued the single individual. He said, my great theme is the private man. Emerson valued first-person accounts. So in this regard, he loved memoirs, he loved confessions, he loved autobiographies, he loved essays, first-person essays. He loved travel writing. Any writing that showed a particular person engaging in a particular environment in an original way, well, this turned Emerson on. Because For Emerson, this was the model by which one should behave in the world. We should all be writing, as he says in his journals, all should be writing our own Bibles, meaning our own spiritual confessions. We should all become our own Ezekiel, as it were, and write down our own specific visions of the Spirit. We should become our own inner Jesus, again, as it were, and lay out our own personal spiritual vision. Emerson famously opens his first book, essay-length book, saying, our age is retrospective. It writes histories, biographies, criticism. I skipped a sentence. Our age is retrospective. It builds the sepulchres of the fathers. It writes histories, biographies, criticism. The idea being that criticism, biography, and history are mediated accounts. They're second or third hand accounts of human experience. And to spend one's time writing such an account or reading such an account is tantamount to building a tomb for a dead person. So, in The American Scholar, Emerson says that books are important for the shaping of the American scholar, for a man thinking. But he also says that we should not overvalue books. We should not become bookworms. That's his word. A bookworm is someone who values authority for the sake of authority, who believes that the best way to gain knowledge about the world is through reading. And the bookworm reads in an effort to understand the ideas of others clearly, deeply, and to conform to the ideas of others. But Emerson says there'll be times when you don't want to read, when it's a beautiful day. You want to put your book down and go outside and enjoy the natural world. As he says, books are for scholars' idle times. So we should not overvalue reading. And when we do read, we should read books that are about individual experiences of unique situations. But there's a way to read. If the bookworm's way of reading is innovating, trying really hard to understand the idea of the writer on a scholarly or academic level, then proper reading is what Emerson calls creative reading. And this is the idea I really want to focus on here, is how Emerson, an American Scholar, describes a certain kind of reading which is not passive at all. It's an active kind of reading. And I think it's the kind of reading that Emerson did, certainly. He only read books that turned him on. He said that the value of a trope in a poem is how much it stimulates you. Emerson also said somewhere that sometimes you can get the essence of a book in 5 sentences. So Emerson read like a creative writer reads. I teach creative writing workshops. I teach literature courses. When I teach literature courses, my job is to teach students how to read literary texts rigorously to gain a profound understanding of them. That suggests that the student should read the entire book, maybe twice. But when I'm teaching creative writing, I tell my students, look, there's different ways of reading when you're writing creatively. Only read that which turns you on. Only read that which makes you want to write. Only read that makes you want to copy it. Not in a slavish, plagiarizing sort of way, but as a model that you can imitate to expand your own imagination. So Emerson read like a writer reads. He describes this in American Scholar. He says this: I would not be hurried by any love of system, by any exaggeration of instincts, to underrate the book. We all know that as the human body can be nourished on any food, though it were boiled grass and the broth of shoes, so the human mind can be fed by any knowledge. And great and heroic men have existed who had almost no other information than the printed page. Sorry about that interruption from my cat Micah. I only would say that it needs a strong head to bear that diet. One must be an inventor to read well. This is what we want to pay attention to. One must be an inventor to read well. As the proverb says, he that would bring home the wealth of the Indies must carry out the wealth of the Indies. There is then, he goes on to say, creative reading as well as creative writing. When the mind is braced by labor and invention, the page of whatever book we read becomes luminous with manifold allusion. Every sentence is doubly significant, and the sense of our author is as broad as the world. Now, one could say that Emerson is here describing what happens in all reading. There was a really popular theory of reading in English departments throughout the land in the 80s and 90s called reader response, based on some of the philosophy of Hans-Georg Gadamer and the literary criticism of Stanley Fish. And the idea of the reader response is that we all bring to a text a certain set of expectations. We all bring to a text a whole history of individuality. We all bring to the text a certain set of biases. And these expectations, these biases, these habits of living necessarily shape the way we will understand the book. In other words, there's no such thing as objective reading. The idea that we can all sit down and read Hamlet rigorously and come up with the same understanding of Hamlet is unrealistic. I have my own Hamlet. You have your own Hamlet. We all have our own Hamlets, because again, it's like we're a particular kind of magnet, and we draw to ourselves a particular kind of steel. So when I'm reading Shakespeare, if you think of Shakespeare's Hamlet as a pattern of metal, given my magnet, I will draw certain bits and more than others. That's reader response. That's an idea that this is how we all read. So in some ways, if Fish is right, and it seems pretty obvious that he is, we all read creatively anyway. We don't necessarily find a text so much as make a text. But that's not what Emerson's saying. Emerson is prescribing a specific kind of reading that is undertaken by man thinking, that is undertaken by the American scholar, that is undertaken by the Emersonian, who craves immediate, powerful, singular experience. So if I'm reading creatively, I'm reading the book looking not necessarily to conform to the meanings it is overtly propounding, but I'm reading the book to try to draw energy from it. What energy does this book give me? And if I'm finding the book is giving me energy, if it's stimulating me, then the language will not only mean what it means denotatively, it will be full of connotations based on how I'm projecting my own life into that text. Now, someone might say this is a selfish way to read. It's an egocentric way to read. You should submit yourself to the vision of the writer. Sure, you should, you can. But Emerson's saying that the most exhilarating reading experiences are those in which we feel like we're looking in a mirror, and a mirror that reflects back to us not necessarily who we are now, but who we want to be. So we can say that in that moment, the text becomes a kind of allegory. An allegory not of politics or history or philosophy, but an allegory of the potential in us that we have not yet realized. That is the manifold allusion. The text takes on layers of meaning when it takes on our powerful projections and reflects them back to us in fresh ways, in new ways. This is creative reading. Emerson did this almost every day in his journals. He would respond to passages in text, and these responses to these passages in the text he was reading often became paragraphs in his essays and lectures. So we can see how Emerson's immediate response to what he's reading is literally an act of writing. As he's reading these texts, he's writing these texts, writing his version of these texts, writing these texts as they were inflected through his own sense of who he wants to be. And then that writing becomes part of what he will publish in books of essays, or what he will enunciate, orate, from the lecture podium. So this is the theory of reading in American Scholar. And I think as we read Emerson in this class, we should try to combine the bookworm and the man thinking. We should submit to Emerson to try to understand what he's saying. As literature students, that's our job. That's what we're doing. We want to understand his style, his form, his ideas. But if we only do that, that's no fun. I mean, Emerson is exciting to read, and he knows how exciting it can be to read. So I think we should also be attuned to that part of reading as well, and take those sentences and take those passages that really speak to us and turn them into inspirations for what we want to do that we have not done, who we want to be that we have not yet become.